Hello, welcome to another episode of the Horror Vision Horror Podcast. My name is Sean,
And I'm Missy.
and we are going to give you a spoiler-free review of a movie that landed on Shudder on Valentine's Day. This is The Dead Thing. And had I remembered that it was going to drop on 2/14, we would have done this review earlier. But I completely spaced, I guess, because of all the hullabaloo about Yellow Jackets and whatnot. So
Hmm.
we both watched this last night. This is directed by Elric Kane, who many people in the horror community will know from the Colors of the Dark podcast. He also does the official podcast of the New Beverly Theater in LA. That's Tarantino's theater. That's the Pure Cinema podcast. And this is his feature-length directing debut. He did also co-direct a feature-length film called Kissy Kiss in 2007. Unfamiliar with that film. But he directed this and he co-wrote it with Webb Wilcoxon. And so this is a film that the kind of elevator synopsis I'll give is just it's a like late 20s, early 30s girl living in LA, working and just kind of get day by day. There's not really any plan in place, and she's using a dating app, it's not Tinder, it's called Friction, I think, in the movie, and she's
Friction.
just dating. It's like just all these guys, and none of them. It's just none of it matters. None of it matters, and then she meets one and a connection is made, but it becomes something else. And it's not like this isn't like a 90s thriller kind of like, Fear, like, with Marky
Hmm.
Mark. It's not like that at all. It's very psychological and haunting. And Elric he's a personality, and I've listened to Colors of the Dark and before that Shockwaves off and on for years. I listen a lot more frequently when I had a commute when I lived in LA. You listen to somebody on a podcast, you get to know them a little bit, right? I
Yep.
mean, you don't actually know them. You feel like you kind
Right.
of know them, but you kind of understand something about them. And I had this as I this is like my one of my most anticipated films of the last like 6 months or whatever,
Okay.
and it fucking lived up. So we're gonna go
Okay.
completely spoiler free because we want people to see this. At some point, we may come back and do like a more in depth thing because I think there's a lot here. But talk about watching this last night. So, how did you feel about the Dead Thing?
Okay. I didn't know anything about it. I am familiar with Colors of the Dark. I listen to the podcast on and off. Um, and I've heard some of the Shockwave stuff too, on and off. But I didn't know anything about this movie. And when I read the synopsis, it just didn't sound like it was going to be my thing at all. So I went in with low expectations and I'm like, I'm just going to give it a try. We'll give it the 30-minute test, see how it goes. And it grabbed me. I, I I was pretty impressed with it. I mean, I liked it. I didn't love it as much as you did, but I enjoyed it, and I was not sitting there. In fact, I said I was going to give it the 30-minute test, and then I looked up at the clock, and it was past 30 minutes, and I still wanted to know what was going to happen. Um, I love the way it's shot. It's a
Yeah.
beautiful film. It's so pretty. Um, and for those of you out there that don't like the slow burners, I usually don't either, but this is very character driven, which is probably why it got me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if you can make me care about your characters, I will care about your story. And I don't know that I'd call this a horror movie. It's a good movie. I don't know that I'd call it a horror movie. It's definitely horror adjacent.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I feel like it's more of a character study about this just lost, disconnected person who is going through the motions of everyday life, trying to feel something and just trying to feel and connect with something. And you get this sequence in the beginning as you're getting to know her where like she just doesn't care about anything until she meets this one person that kind of
Mm-hmm.
changes everything. Um, I actually found it very engaging. I was not bored. I was not checking my watch. Um, the characters are interesting. And I love the way the movie looks. And it kind of went in some directions I wasn't expecting. Because it does bear a little bit like some similarities to Bones and All, which is one of my favorite movies, but then it goes in a really different direction. It gets pretty dark and fucked up and kind of amps up at the end. And
Hmm.
I did I liked that that's not where I thought it was gonna go. And uh I did end up enjoying it. I don't know that it's something I'd revisit often, but I'm glad you picked it. I'm glad we watched it because I wouldn't have. I wouldn't have watched it based on that thumbnail and that synopsis, not knowing the director or anything about it.
Right.
Also, it does not only are the performances really, really strong, one of the lead actors, John Carna, he's Noah from the MTV Scream series,
Okay.
which I loved. I loved his character in this. He's always a pleasure when he's on screen, and I was happy to see him.
That's cool. So I wanted to mention because you're correct. I think this is a beautiful movie, sonically and visually. The cinematographer is, and I'm going to probably butcher their name, Ayana Vasile, and this looks like it's their first. Um, no, actually, their first feature as a cinematographer was something called Real, Reel Zombies. I have not heard of that,
Me neither.
but I really felt like it was, oh, it's just gorgeous. And I was reading an interview with Elric Kane, the director and co-writer, before we started recording, and he was talking about how they had a low budget, but they were really able with digital cameras. They were able to, in very low lighting, capture this like beautiful emptiness of LA at night, and that was one of the things that really spoke to me in this movie, having spent 16 and a half years in LA before leaving in August 2022. There is a certain and something in the dirt really that came out like right after I moved, and that movie really I went back and saw the premiere at Beyond Fest, and Benson and Moorhead were there, and they talked about this like this feeling in LA at night and in the Hollywood Hills and whatnot, and this like kind of emptiness in the spooky eerie emptiness. And this film captures it so perfectly. It captures these kind of liminal places that are for people that are no longer young adults, but they're not quite adults yet. So it's like your 20s and 30s, like Silver Lake, Eagle Rock. I mean, it's not exclusively for those ages, but I knew a lot of people lived in those areas when I moved there when I was 30. And it's just like some of the shots just out the windows of the apartment. I'm like, I've seen that. Or like the sidewalks, the gates that go into the apartment complexes, just even like the candles on the tables in the bars. It's something that if you hadn't spent a lot of time in these neighborhoods in LA, you would never, you wouldn't see it. It's not like you wouldn't think it was pretty, but you just wouldn't see what
Hmm.
I saw, you know? So
Right.
that was really cool. Uh, Also, the music is just the score is not ever what I would have thought, but it made perfect sense, knowing as I do, Elric Kane's taste just through what he talks about on the podcasts. And Michael Krasner and Robin Vining were the composers, and I felt like they fucking knocked it out of the park for this movie that is exactly, it's got this eerie loneliness to it, which fits perfectly like what you said with this main character that's just lonely,
Just
disaffected. It's not even that they're lonely in the way a lot of times people say, oh, that person's lonely, like she clearly wants to find somebody, but she's
right.
so disaffected and like disillusioned through all
And
of this modern living.
disconnected.
Yeah,
She's
and
disconnected from everything.
the scene where she meets
Kyle.
Kyle, I think it was him where she's saying like, "Oh, to die in like one of these hipster bars or like in this
Yeah.
like shitty apartment. And I
Hmm.
literally turned to Kirsten. I was like, sounds like she needs to leave LA. And then on screen, he goes, it sounds like you need to leave LA. But it, and her like description, the writing there, like, you ever feel trapped? Like it's just every day is
Hmm.
different, and you think at first maybe it's not different, but then you realize it is. And like, oh, I just felt like it was so emotionally charged while being completely kind of devoid of emotion, which is
Hmm.
interesting. It's an interesting like add and subtract at the same time kind of chemistry.
But no, you're right on because I think that's what I connected to. Usually, for me to connect to a movie, it's directly through characters. But in this, it was. I mean, I wanted to see what happened to her, but it was more. I was more connected to that feeling of feeling trapped in the everyday and wanting
Yeah.
something to make you feel alive.
Yeah.
Like I feel like that is a very relatable emotion. And I mean, that's what I connected with, and that's why it didn't feel boring, I guess.
Hmm. Yeah, I could see that. It definitely it steeps. Like tea, it steeps. It's not there's tension, but it's not like it's not all about the tension. It is a character study, like you said, and it is. I don't know. It just really grows into what it becomes.
Yeah, it's not so much tension, it's more like when she does start feeling emotions, we feel it through the
Yeah.
film. Because first you feel disconnected, then when she meets Kyle and connects with him, there's almost this intoxicating way that the camera moves and whatnot, where it kind of lulls you into that. And then as things start to go dark and upside down, and it starts to feel very oppressive.
Yeah.
I was impressed with how it conveyed that. Because again, I'm not that I can't enjoy a slow burn or some something more artsy like this, but I'm not always the best audience for it.
Right.
And
Right.
I didn't have any problem with this. I I was in. And it was because of the way he was conveying these emotions and pulling you through the story. Because you don't get to know, I mean, you do get to know these characters, but not in the way I would normally connect with them. So I was impressed with the way they told the story. And the colors, I love the colors. There are scenes where she's like in a dark room under like a tanning light, but she looks green and otherworldly, and it's so fucking beautiful.
You, we had the hardest time at first. I was like, what is this fucking light? Because why would you tan and why would you tan with clothes on alone in your room and have tan lines? And then I realized, oh, she works at night. It's a vitamin. What's the vitamin you get from the?
Vitamin D, I think.
Yeah, that's what it is. That's how she gets her sunshine.
Oh, it's a sun lamp.
Yeah,
Yeah, I thought she was tanning, but I guess that makes sense. I mean, I have a cousin that when he was born, he was jaundiced, and they had to like put him under a lamp or set him in the window for a little while, like a plant.
nice.
And I
Oh
remember
wow.
just thinking that was so strange. Um, so maybe it's that kind of light then.
But it does. I like what you said about how it becomes oppressive because there's a good example of that, and we're still spoiler free. But early on, when she first meets him, there's what I took for a passage of time, and then you realize like, oh no, that wasn't a passage of time at all. That was just
Hmm.
like, you know, either the same night or maybe like a weekend or
I
whatever.
I
And
think it was like maybe a 24-hour period. Like
yeah, and
they met for a date. They were together that whole night
yeah,
into the morning, afternoon when she would sleep because she works nights. Like they were together all that time, and then she leaves to go to work.
yeah, and it's like that's illustrating kind of the newfound joy or thrill of this like attraction, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the same thing happens later, but it's a totally different outcome
Yeah.
to it, and it's oppressive. And so I was like, oh, that's kind of fucking a brilliant device to show the kind of two sides of that.
And that's it kind of, I mean, now this isn't another, we recently saw Companion that deals with like toxic relationships,
Hmm.
and this definitely has that too.
Yeah,
It starts out, they said it starts out feeling a bit like Bones and All, where they have this intense connection in the beginning, but in Bones and All, where they come together and they really see each other, and this, it's something completely different.
yeah,
And when it flips, it feels fucking oppressive.
yeah,
And then the interactions between them, just it feels like this, like you're watching her thinking, run, like
yeah,
just get the fuck out.
yeah.
This is going to go super bad, super fast. Get the fuck out. Like we see it, but she's trapped.
Yeah, I have already have two movies on my best of 2025 list on Letterboxd, and it's Grafted and The Dead Thing.
It didn't hit me quite that hard, but I'm glad we watched it.
Yeah,
I did enjoy it. There are certainly like it's a pretty, I feel like it's a pretty unique film, and I dug
I
that.
think so. I think so. It feels a little bit. It feels like a movie from like the late 70s, kind of like 77, but not completely because it's all about like modernity, right? So that's an interesting kind of balance that it has. But the score, especially, I was like, oh my God, this score just feels so classic 70s horror movie to me. And even the title, like I saw somebody somewhere bag on the title, and I think the title's fucking perfect because
The title's perfect.
it reminds me of like a love. It's not Lovecraftian. I want to say that right there, but like those kind of like ancestral horror, like deep 70s, 80s horror writers that like
Hmm.
they had titles like that where it's kind of ambiguous but like startling in a way. I mean, it's in
Oh, and it's,
2025, it's not startling, but
but it's still perfect because that title refers to two very different things.
yes, yes, yep, that's
And I
exactly where
mean,
I was
I'm not
going.
going to say it because I don't want to spoil anything, but that title has, it's a loaded title.
Yeah, agreed.
I think it's funny you keep mentioning the score though, because I honestly like, I guess I don't always, the scores don't always hit me the same way.
Hmm.
Like, I don't even really remember hearing music, but I was so wrapped up in the visuals and the colors. I get captivated by the camera. It it happens a lot.
I think I just feel like almost nobody, I don't want to say nobody else, but it was such a singular choice to go with this score. And I just think that it did something for the movie like that really helped accentuate everything I liked about it.
Okay. Well, and it's, I mean, it's an odd one too because I mean, and this isn't a spoiler because they say it in the Shutter synopsis that when she meets this guy, there's, he's got a dark secret.
Yeah.
Um, and this is one of those, I mean, again, like Bones and All, where it's very rooted in the real world, where it's kind of got this supernatural element a little bit, but it's downplayed to the point where it still feels very real world.
Yeah.
And like it doesn't always it doesn't always work for me,
Hmm.
but it worked. He does it well here.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. It makes it a little bit more haunting, the fact
yeah.
that it is, there is a supernatural element, but it's just not like really played up in a supernatural capacity. I mean, it is, but just not like, I feel like would have been very easy to go very big with that, and instead he
Hmm.
like chose to be reserved and play it close to his chest, and I think it really made something unique.
Yeah, it makes it feel very eerie,
Yeah.
eerie and haunting. And I dug that a lot. Especially too, because again, I went in with low expectations, and then I read that synopsis, and I was thinking like it's gonna be another vampire flick. I don't want to see another vampire flick.
Yeah.
I was
Thank
really
God it's not.
happy that it was not, yeah, it was really different than what I was expecting. It it's a slow, quiet movie, but it's a good one. It's not usually my cup of tea, and I still enjoyed it. I dug it.
Good. I'm glad you did. I'm glad you took the ride.
Yeah, me too. I'm glad you picked it because it's not something that would have grabbed me if I was just poking around on Shutter.
Well, and that's about all we can say without ruining anything. So that's all we'll say. But that's the Dead Thing, and just kudos to everybody involved, and watch it. It's on Shutter. So, and until the next episode of the Horror Vision Horror Podcast, my name is Sean.
And I'm Missy.
Hapless teenagers beset by demons in the woods. A strange new drug that turns art into murder. A can't beat a deal on a new house with a horrifying past. A video game that might usher in the apocalypse. From the demented mind of Sean C. Baker, author of A Collection of Desires, Shadow Play, and Murder Virus, comes Volume 4, collecting Baker's no sleep work along with several never-before-published short stories. This 99-cent volume also includes the opening chapter of the author's forthcoming teenage giallo novel, Black Gloves and Broken Hearts, due out later this year.